Hello and welcome to the Farm Traveler Podcast. Do we sound a little bit better? Do we sound more bassier? We got a new mic, so our episodes will be sounding real fresh. So welcome to episode 15 of the Farm Traveler Podcast. This week's episode is with Anthony and Brian and Livewire Hops in Illinois. Anthony and Brian are going to talk to us about why they started their hop business, the exact process that hops play in making beer, an absolutely wonderful, incredible thing, and how the craft beer industry is in Illinois and across the U.S., and also some really cool hop facts. So it's a really cool conversation we're going to have. And also, don't forget, this is episode 15, and we are doing our Yeti Giveaway, and we're going to announce the winner in just a second. All you had to do was leave an iTunes written review and follow us on Instagram, and we have selected a winner, and a little video showing the behind the scenes on how we selected the winner is going to be on our Instagram page. So, the winner of the 14-ounce Yeti tumbler, that also includes a really cool Farm Traveler sticker, is going to be Nanette Hoover. Nanette, congratulations and thank you for leaving a review. I will be sure to reach out to you and ask for your contact info so we can get that Yeti to you as soon as possible. So again, thank you everybody for leaving us a review. We've got 12 reviews on iTunes, which is really cool, or 12 as of, July 2nd, which is today. So thank you so much. We can't wait to bring you a lot of really cool episodes, and we're going to have another contest in a few weeks. So pay attention to that, and we'll let you know. So again, this is episode 15 with Anthony Brand of Livewire Hops. Hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. Well, Anthony and Brian, welcome to the Farm Traveler Podcast. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Very well. Thanks for having us, Trevor.
Well, thank you for being here. So you guys are with Livewire Hops in the great state of Illinois. So kind of walk us through when you guys started that, why you started it, and what kind of kicked off that passion of growing hops.
Well, Trevor, back in, it was August of 2016, there is a pretty epic annual farm party that happens on Brian's family's farm every summer. That brings our families and our many of our friends together. And I had at that point in my life kind of gotten into a little bit of home brewing and a little bit of craft beer, and had done a little bit of research. And I, not coming from an ag background, knew a guy, my cousin Brian here, who did have an ag background, and knew that hops were something that contributed pretty heavily to the craft beer renaissance, and saw absolutely no reason why they couldn't be grown in Illinois if you had the ambition to do so.
Right.
So I approached Brian on the idea, and I was all excited and ready to go, and I thought he was going to be all in on the idea just by saying a few words, and his response was, "What are hops?" So I knew I had some selling to do.
But the selling point became very easy, as we may have mentioned, when he said, "Well, hops make beer." And I said, "Oh, I'm in. I like it. I love it."
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's a good little pitch.
Yeah. So one thing led to another. It could be said that initially it was my idea, but Brian ultimately was the one that took action. And there's a little pasture ground on his family's farm that hadn't been used in recent years. It was used in the past for, I think, 4-H projects, and
correct.
One time I think it had some horses on it and some cattle, and
everything.
That is now our experimental hop yard, and we are about an acre footprint and 1 acre of about 40 total in the entire state of Illinois.
My wife and I went to Ireland, I think last month. And of course, when you go to Ireland, you have to go to the Guinness factory in Dublin. And so we did that, and we went and saw their whole process. And I didn't know that hops apparently only grow in very specific regions in the world. And I'm assuming, of course, Illinois is in that region. So what are some things that you guys learned once you kind of started in the hop industry?
Yeah, so you're definitely right that they can be somewhat finicky, in particular on certain geographies. The learning side, I guess, for me was more that, in my mind, we're growing a crop, we can grow anything. The interesting part about hops is we may not be in the complete ideal area, but what we do have going is latitude, right? So hops are very much based around light. They need a lot of light for their growing season and their growing pattern. Just so happens that where northern Illinois lines up, we are right on the right area of latitude that receives a bunch of sunlight during the growing season. Interestingly enough, it kind of lines up the same latitude with where like 98% of the hops in the United States are grown in Oregon. We do have some issues that they do not, such as the fantastic Illinois humidity that we experience from time to time in the summers, and also this year in particular, heavy rain from time to time, which can be timed well or not well. But either way, the biggest issue was the whole sunlight thing, which we have lots of. So that's definitely a positive, and again is one of the particular things that are extremely important when you're trying to grow hops.
All right, so you guys mentioned that y'all have done some home brewing in the past.
Yeah, I have. Brian has not been exposed to home brewing, but I keep saying we need to change that on a pretty significant scale. So that's my little side pet project that we need to get them involved, because I guess, Trevor, have you done any home brewing at all?
Yeah, I have. So my wife bought me a little kit for Christmas, and so we tried it. We had a little beer party a few months ago, and I was like, all right, we need to make some home brewed beer for this party. And so we did it. The instructions weren't super duper clear, and apparently, and I Googled this, and apparently it's a thing, but we had a beer bomb. And so I used some of those old glass bottles that have like the flip cap on them, and we made about 4 bottles, and we put it in our liquor cabinet, and it came home while they were fermenting. I opened it and was like, why is there a giant shard of glass here? Wait a minute, there's 3 bottles. Where's the 4th bottle? And so apparently one of the bottles wasn't done fermenting, and of course it blew up. Did you have anything like that?
Yeah. One homebrew that I did with some neighborhood buddies is actually, I think, one of the very first ones that I was ever a part of. Put it in my buddy's dining room area, and he awoke to a volcano of newly fermented beer. Literally, it blew the top off of the fermenter and was like volcanoing up into like the ceiling and all that. And as you can imagine, his wife was thrilled at the sight of this beer cano that was going on. So
I think it sounds way cooler than it probably is if you're there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these instructions, I wasn't sure on what to do because it was the first time, so the next time will be a whole lot easier. But I had to boil the grains, and it didn't say whether to throw that water out or not. So I was just like, okay, I'll throw it out. And so we mixed it and we drank it, and it wasn't bad. You could taste the alcohol, but more or less it tasted like you took a little drop of beer and put it in a giant bottle of vodka, and that's what it tasted like. Like the beer footprint was there, but it was mostly alcohol. So next time we'll take our time doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of home brewing. I mean, not all of them are successful, and you kind of learn as you go. You learn the do's and don'ts as you go, and it's been very interesting for us. We've had the privilege of meeting a lot of commercial brewers that we're now selling our hops to, and we have yet to meet a commercial brewer who didn't get their start home brewing. And there's just this really kind of cool, familial thing going on in American beer right now, where everybody kind of accepts one another as if you're a novice home brewer, but somebody who appreciates craft beer, that's cool. But if you're brewing beer at Founders or Dogfish Head or Boston Beer Company, you're in the club too. So
right. A lot of camaraderie for sure.
Yep.
Right, yeah, it sounds like that. So let's kind of talk about hops a little bit. I know that with beer, there's 4 main ingredients. You got grain, yeast, water, and hops. So, tell us more about how important hops are, and then how different varieties of hops can give different beers different flavors.
Yeah. So, I mean, hops essentially are the driver between all of your bitterness, a lot of your flavor, and all of your aroma in beer. They are driving all of those things. So, hops have basically a component of hops is the lupulin glands, which kind of take the form of a yellowy powder that grow inside the hop cone, or hops are basically a flower. So they grow inside the flower when they get to kind of their peak ripeness, and it's within that little yellow dust that all of those things happen, and happen for beer, in the brewing process. So,
And the great part of it is, so there is 150 plus different varieties and more coming online each year. And by variety, really what we're talking about is a flavor or an aroma or a specific profile that, some of them are similar and some are extremely different in the flavors that you'll get, and thus the giant amount of flavors and aromas you get in craft beer. That's why there are so many different beers out there, is because they're using these different combinations of flavors and aromas coming from the lupulin and the hops, and that's really where you're getting this craft beer boom to. Everybody wants to do something different. What's the newest flavor we can create? What's the newest taste or feel on your palate? And don't get me wrong, the entire process of brewing has to come together correctly to have a quality beer, but at the end of the day, the flavor and the aroma is definitely coming from the hops.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So within those lupulin glands, within the lupulin powder, is all of hops's bitterness, which comes from alpha and beta acids. And then there is oils, and there's a lot of kind of emerging research that's happening on oil compounds and hops. And we've started to kind of educate ourselves, at least at a macro level, on what some of those oil compounds will do. But really, I mean, it's like I say, it's emerging research. It's stuff that's coming out where, depending on the type of oil that you have present in the hops, it's going to give you a certain flavor and aroma profile, like citrusy notes, or like a more earthy note, or a more floral note, what have you. So that's where the differences kind of come into play.
Okay. Now, I'm not a big fan of IPAs, Indian Pale Ales, but I know though they have like the highest hop flavor in any beer, right?
Yeah, they're definitely one of the hoppiest beers that money can buy, for sure, and very, very popular. Obviously, I would argue that the American craft beer renaissance, as I call it, was really kind of built around the India Pale Ale. I mean, it was definitely one of the major contributors to it.
Gotcha. So walk us through y'all's process. I mean, what's it like now? You said you guys propagate your own your hop plants, or you get those from somebody. So walk us through that whole process.
Yeah.
Sure.
So basically, the way we got started is you can start growing hops in, I guess, two different fashions, really. At the end of the day, a hop plant comes from a rhizome or a root. The plant constantly wants to expand the area that it's at and multiply and grow, and it does that through the roots or the rhizomes. So it's very actually easy to do, but you can start growing from a rhizome or cut a part of a root off, replant it, and it's, as long as it's a good healthy plant, it'll grow from that root. So that's one way to expand or double the operation and whatnot. The other way is, which what we have done, is kind of got in contact with a greenhouse or a hop propagator. So they have gone through the process and kind of, I would say, pre-screened the rhizomes. The plants that we started with were already grown in a greenhouse for a year. The good part about that is it's a closed environment. They're going to weed out the ones that might have had some disease issues or things like that. And they're going to make sure you get a female plant, which, side note, all the hops that we're going to have are female plants. You do not want a male plant to pollinate, like we think of a corn crop. You're going to pollinate things. We don't want that in hops. If the flower or the cone becomes pollinated, it really ruins the flavor and the aroma and completely changes the chemistry of the plant. So we started with these baby plants that are about a year old from the greenhouse, and then we brought them to our yard and started from that point. Year one was us learning, but really establishing the root system of the plant and getting it to grow. And then year 2 and 3, which really the third year is kind of when the hop plant starts to reach or begin to reach more full maturity. Your first year of growth, really, you're not going to quite get the numbers in terms of the acid and oil values that you're looking for. But as the plant ages and grows older and matures more, you're really going to see it come into full, I guess, max yield, and your numbers are going to be more in line with what you're targeting for oils and acids. And thus, that's really what the brewers are looking for. They want to understand and know what they're getting ahead of time in terms of a quality hop. And that's really what we're trying to focus on, is make sure our plants in our yard are the quality that is expected, the flavor profile that is expected, and sometimes something new that these guys are looking for.
Okay. Now, you guys touched base a little bit on whenever we were having our first few conversations, is that you guys have kind of transitioned to a spot market instead of like signing traditional contracts. So how did that kind of come around, and how has that impacted your business model?
Yeah. So, we kind of started by saying, this is an experiment. We want to prove to ourselves that Northern Illinois can grow, something other than corn, soybeans, or winter wheat, right? So we put a certain amount of investment kind of on the table and said, okay, this is going to be, what we're willing to risk on a small scale. And we certainly worked on the growing side of things. We worked on our sales and marketing end of things. We developed some relationships with some local brewers around here. We're kind of positioned in between what's known as the Quad Cities, which are 4 cities in Illinois and Iowa, Rockford north of us, Chicago to the east of us, and Peoria to the south of us. So we've kind of got a lot of craft brewery action going on all around us, and we've tried to develop those relationships. And what we found in developing those relationships is that, back in, 2012, 2013, 2014, there was a bit of a hop shortage. So breweries were in a position where they were signing these contracts that were very sort of positive for the growers, but weren't necessarily conducive to the breweries themselves. They were signing 5-year contracts
at inflated prices because of the shortage in the market at the time.
Right. And basically agreeing to taking, in some cases, hop stocks that they may need or they may not need, for the benefit of getting their hops in the here and now. Supply and demand has shifted a little bit more to where there isn't this shortage that's going on right now. So brewers are in a lot, I guess, more hesitant position to sign as aggressive of contracts as they were back in, as I said, like the 2012, 2014 time frame. So what we found in working with our brewers is they appreciate the flexibility, and we talk, very closely with them, and we explain that, as it is in their brew house, buying, fermenters and bright tanks and all the plumbing, it's very, very capital intensive for us in the same way to establish even an acre of hops. So we try to, be flexible in that way, but there's also a point in time in our business model where if we're gonna, really, really expand, we gotta have pen to paper. We gotta have more than just kind of a soft commitment. But up until this point, we've been able to work mostly on soft commitments.
You guys have a lot of home brewers come in to get some of your hops?
We have actually done a fair amount of selling to home brewers. We're very present at some local craft beer festivals. We get to talk to a lot of home brewers at those. Always appreciate those conversations. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, home brewing is really kind of the backbone of the American craft beer movement. People that are really enthusiastic about beer are just constantly experimenting with it, trying new things, are willing to take big risks, which, sometimes lead to big rewards and great results. So we do keep home brewers very much in mind, and have really appreciated our interactions with them to this point.
Gotcha. That's really cool. Now in Illinois, I guess, well, for Illinois and the United States as a whole, what's the whole hop industry like? Like, what's the status of it? I'm assuming it's grown the past couple of years because of home brewers and kind of the popular rise of craft beers. So what's the industry looking like right now?
So one of the interesting things about that, and Anthony touched on it briefly, but if you go back again, probably about 4, 5, 6 years ago, there was a tremendous shortage. And this was in part due to this huge boom in craft beer. I think we see that in all facets of the food experience right now with the U.S. buyer, right? We all want to find something different. We like the idea of local. We like the idea of this brewery's down the street from me, that, and it's fantastic. And we should like that. But what happened when that boom began is the craft beer industry exploded at a huge pace, and quite frankly, outpaced the hop market as a commodity. So as I mentioned earlier, it takes a few years to turn an acre into a productive hop acre. You can't just, as in the typical corn and soybean markets, plant it in the spring and harvest it in the fall. I got to plant it this year, and 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I'm going to have something to sell. So the boom happened, and there was a shortage for a couple of years. But the industry and the hop farmer, wherever they are, as most farmers are good at, when they gear up and get ready to go, they go hard. And at the time, the price was good. So especially in the Pacific Northwest, these guys added a tremendous amount of acres into production. So it took a couple years for that production to hit the market. And today it has. So now we're seeing, there is not a shortage as an issue. The good news is there is a huge demand from the craft brew industry and the beer industry in general. But it's a little bit different marketplace today compared to what it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. In fact, last year, so this would be the fall of 2000, and I'm going to go 2 years back, fall of 2017, the USDA tracks hop production as it does with all commodities. And I believe we were up something like 15%, which is, again, massive, a huge increase. And then this past year, again, more productive acres coming online. The hop industry in the fall of 2018 increased another 20%.
And that's U.S. total.
Yep. So put that in perspective. In two years, things increased almost 35% of production. So again, it's a totally different marketplace. But the interesting part is there is a bulk, I guess, for lack of a better term, bulk commodity hop, right? That's what we can all get and expect online or from the large producers. But at the same time, there's kind of these niche specialty markets where you can find a hop grown in Illinois that might be the same variety as one grown in the Pacific Northwest, but due to our growing conditions, our climate, the soils, lots of different things, it might actually have a different flavor or a different aroma or a different taste completely. So while we're in the same industry, different geographies are taking on different characteristics, which is really exciting, again, especially from our standpoint. But, we've experienced this with some brewers that are really good partners with us, and it's exciting to hear them say, one, we're pleased with your product, but two, this was totally different than what we're used to. And it's exciting for them. These guys want to do something different all the time. So our hope is that we can be part of that and have something that is totally different from, the run-of-the-mill commodity that they've been used to in the past.
Yep. But Trevor, in Illinois specifically, we tend to be a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of jumping into things with specialty ag, I would say, in general. Because we're such a big, corn and soybean area up where we're at. I mean, that's what people are used to, and it's been productive around here for a really long time. But Michigan, right to the north of us, I mean, they I think within the last couple years surpassed New York as the number 4 producing hop state in the United States. So only behind the Pacific Northwest states that we were getting into earlier, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and then Michigan for hop production. So while we're not seeing that kind of growth in Illinois, I would say that in generally here in the Midwest, there has been a shift towards more hop production on a smaller scale.
Cool. I'm glad the whole industry is growing as a whole, and that's great that you guys. I mean, your product is so unique, and so those brewers are like, oh, well, they've got something super unique, and we can make a really cool beer, and so it seems like a win-win for all of you guys, which is really neat.
I always kind of say it this way when I travel somewhere, I want to taste the local flavor. I would be way more interested in going to your neck of the woods and getting a recommendation from you on, okay, this is the taste of my hometown, as opposed to having something that I've had 1,000 times before, right? And Brian and I are big believers in that. We think that our area, like any other area around the world, has something unique to offer, and that's what we're trying to achieve in a very small way.
So looking ahead, what are some big plans you guys have for Livewire hops within the next 5 or 10 years or so? What are some things you'd like to accomplish, and how would you like to see the brewery or the hop business grow?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, very self-serving for us, but we, the Pacific Northwest, has they're a reason why they're the leaders. They've done an incredible job growing hops over several decades, and their quality is great. Their production is great, and therefore they are 97% of the overall market. We would like to see them continue to do well. Certainly, we're not here to rain on their parade at all, but we would like to see, I guess, more of the take of just the locally sourced ingredients in beer. That's very self-serving for us, and our model is very much based on we're going to grow with the local craft beer industry around us. So partnering with our brewers that are already our customers and some prospective customers around here, we're gonna scale up as their demands require us to. So our dreams are really sort of connected to our craft beer partners around us, being willing to take on more local hops and being willing to experiment with something that really gives them something completely different and new that they otherwise wouldn't have.
Right. Would you guys ever brew your own beer? Like a Livewire beer or something?
It's interesting you say that. So we do it's very, very interesting. It's very cool, I guess, for lack of a better term. But what we found is that so as the brewers tend to have a lot of camaraderie, so do hop growers, locally around here, because it's not easy, and there's no perfect way to do it. So everybody's constantly sharing ideas and thoughts. But it's funny because your comment right there of, hey, what if we grow the hop and rebrew the beer? That's certainly been a thought for everybody. But I'm kind of here to tell you right now, both of those endeavors are very labor intensive and very specialized, and dreaming of doing them both together, I think is probably a dream. But the reality is you got to take a lot of time and effort to be really good at one or the other. So, maybe someday, but that would probably be down the road. Instead, we would rather do our best to provide the quality and then give it to the real artists, that are making the beer. And gosh, if they're going to make it, I'm probably going to go and try it.
There are people out there that have done it, and we tip our hats to them because, as Brian said, they're both incredibly labor intensive. But as we alluded to earlier, they're both incredibly capital intensive as well. I mean, to get a hop yard established is capital intensive. To buy all your necessary brewing equipment to produce beer in significant volume is capital intensive. So we're not as focused on that. I would say, like, goal wise, we want to continue to get as vertically integrated with our operation as we possibly can. We're really wanting to at some point be able to do everything from start to finish within our growing season. From we already do our own harvesting, but from the point that we harvest all the way through, we're packaging a product. We would like to continue to up our vertical integration in that.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So I'll be sure to list out some of the beers that different breweries use for y'all. I know it's like Prairie Street IPA, American Harry, American IPA, Mother Hen. So I'll be sure to list out some of those. But for people that might be listening that are in your area around Illinois, where are some good breweries that they can head to that are selling your product, your hops?
Yeah, so I mean, you started to mention them. So Prairie Street up in Rockford, awesome brewery, just a beautiful space right along the Rock River up there. So they're you mentioned their Prairie Street IPA, which is their flagship product, is brewed with our Illinois grown Cascades. Just down the road from them.
And so they have the Prairie Street IPA as well as the Nor'easter, which they just started brewing here with some hops we provided recently as well. So
yep,
that's one more there.
And the Nor'easter is very exciting in many ways because that is a hop that was introduced by our propagator up in Michigan. It's a proprietary variety called Mackinac that we are thinking about bringing to Illinois, and the results of that beer have been incredibly positive. I mean, it gives off like a very like tropical fruit kind of taste and aroma to it, like almost kind of like a mango guava kind of combination, which is really, really interesting. So we're thinking about planting some of those next year. Actually, this year, I should say, this coming growing season. And then we have, so as far as other breweries go, we've got Harry Cow in Byron, Illinois, which is just down the road from Rockford. That's the one that has the American Harry American IPA. That one is just a very drinkable, you think of IPA as something that's really, like you were saying earlier, Trevor, is like a hop bomb of a beer. This one definitely has hop character to it, but I've talked to a lot of people that have tried it, and the word that I hear the most used with that one is smooth. It's just incredibly smooth, very drinkable, very approachable that way. I really enjoy it, but I'm incredibly biased at the same time. And then we have Kenny Farms Distilling in Rochelle. They're going to be they already are a full-blown distillery, but they're working on their whiskey right now, and of course that takes time to age. And they are currently serving vodka and beer.
Correct.
And they introduced this beer called the Mother Hen, which is a combination of hibiscus.
Correct.
And our Illinois Cascades. So that one is a very unique beer unto itself as well, and quite delicious. So we've got kind of a few different ones going on around our area right now, and we hope that there's certainly more in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure the list will keep growing. And if I'm ever up in Illinois around that area, I'll be sure to hit up one of those breweries and try to find y'all's beer.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you out at the yard sometime too, man.
Hey, absolutely. I mean, you guys say you sell to home brewers, so next time I order, or next time we do a home brew here, I'm going to have to order from you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if people want to learn more about you, what are your social media outlets? What's your website? How can they find out more about Livewire Hops?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on Facebook, so you can and Instagram. So just check us out at Livewire Hops. We're currently working on our website. Our website's under construction at the moment, but once that is launched here in the next couple months, it's just livewirehops.com.
Sweet. Well, sounds pretty good. Well, Anthony, Brian, thank you guys so much for being on. We'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate you having us on.